There's something about a clinking glass that makes people shut up. Maybe it's the sound, sharp and deliberate, like punctuation in the middle of chaos. Or maybe it's the moment, that split second between words when everyone decides whether to pretend nothing happened or brace for impact. Either way, I've never liked being the center of attention, but that night, I chose it. And not because I wanted to, because I needed to. My name's Aaron. I'm 34, recently divorced, and according to my stepmother, on a bit of a losing streak. I wish I could tell you she meant that kindly. But if you've ever dealt with someone who grins while twisting the knife, you already know exactly what kind of woman she is. Growing up, my family looked picture perfect from the outside. We had the house with the white porch, the holiday cards with matching sweaters, the Aaron and Jacob are doing just fine updates from mom that glossed over everything. But inside, my dad was emotionally distant. My younger brother Jacob learned to weaponize charm early, and when my mom died unexpectedly when I was 15, things shattered fast. Within a year, Dad had remarried. Enter Diane, my stepmother, a woman who wore pearls to grocery stores and believed empathy was a weakness you outgrew in college. She was the kind of person who treated pain like a performance. When Jacob sprained his wrist in high school, she cried louder than he did. When I got rejected from my first-choice college, she smiled and said, "Well, at least now you'll be closer to home." And when my ex-wife and I separated 6 months ago, after a quiet, painful 2 years of trying to pretend we weren't growing apart, Diane sent me a bouquet with a card that read, "You're stronger than you think." Even if she was out of your league. Yeah, I hadn't spoken to her in months. I'd kept my distance from most of the family, honestly, except for the occasional phone call from my dad, which always felt more like a courtesy check-in than actual conversation. Jacob and I had never been particularly close, but he tried sometimes, usually when he needed something. We were 4 years apart, and he'd always been the golden one. Charming, spontaneous, the life of the party. He was the kind of guy who failed his math class and got a boys will be boys pat on the back. I was the one who came home with a B+ and got a "What happened here, Aaron?" So when Jacob called to invite me to his engagement party, I'll admit, I hesitated. We hadn't talked since before my divorce, and even then, it was mostly surface level. But he sounded genuine. Said he really wanted me there. Said it would mean a lot. And maybe, just maybe, I was craving a little connection. Maybe I missed the idea of family more than the reality. I almost turned around the second I stepped into the banquet hall. It was this ritzy venue downtown, all marble floors and chandeliers. Everything looked expensive and perfectly curated, like something out of a lifestyle influencer's Instagram. There were about 70 people already there, all mingling with champagne flutes and air kisses. I didn't recognize half of them. Jacob spotted me right away. He grinned and waved me over with that same lopsided charm that got him out of speeding tickets in high school. "Aaron," he said, clapping me on the back. "You made it, man. I wasn't sure you would." I shrugged. Wouldn't miss it. He introduced me to his fiancée, Rachel, who seemed lovely, poised, polite, and just a little too polished, like someone trying to impress a room full of strangers. We made small talk for a minute. Then Jacob got pulled away by some friends. I wandered toward the long table where the place cards were arranged in perfect cursive rows. That's when I saw it. My name card read, "Aaron, better luck next time." At first, I thought it was a mistake. A weird inside joke I didn't get. Then I saw Diane standing nearby, chatting with 2 other women, holding a glass of white wine and laughing like she hadn't just publicly humiliated me in front of a room full of people. I stood there for a second, staring at the card. My face felt hot. My palms itched. It would have been so easy to just pick it up, toss it in the trash, and pretend it didn't bother me. That's what I used to do. Swallow it down. Keep the peace. But something about that moment, about how casual it all was, lit a fuse I didn't even realize I'd been carrying. Diane caught my eye and smiled. "Oh, don't look so serious, Aaron. It's a joke." She laughed again, this thin, rehearsed laugh that made my skin crawl. "You did get divorced, didn't you?" I opened my mouth, closed it, then glanced around. People were watching now, quietly, discreetly, the way people do when they want gossip without being part of it. I took a breath, stepped away from the table, tried to keep my heart from pounding through my ribs. "Here," Diane said, picking up a fresh glass of champagne and offering it to me like a peace offering she didn't mean. "You'll feel better once you loosen up. This is a celebration, after all." I took the glass, not because I wanted it, but because I needed a second. I looked at her, at the woman who had spent the last 15 years needling me with thinly veiled insults, and I suddenly realized I wasn't angry. I was done. Done trying to make things okay. Done trying to be polite. Done playing the role of the overlooked older brother with potential who never quite lived up to it. I was 34 years old, and I'd spent the better part of my life letting people like Diane write the story of who I was. So I clinked my glass. The room quieted just enough. Not completely, but enough. I raised the glass slowly, not smiling. "Here's to new beginnings," I said, voice calm and steady. "And the last time you'll ever see me." And I walked out. Just like that. But of course, that wasn't really the end. Not even close. Because walking out only works when the door stays closed behind you. And some doors have a way of opening again, especially when you find out what they've been hiding all along. I wish I could say that walking out of that engagement party was the clean break I needed, that I made my toast, turned my back, and never looked back. But that's not how life works, especially not with family. Especially not with my family. Because when I left that night, I thought I was burning a bridge. But what I didn't realize was that they were already piling up wood on their end, dousing it in gasoline, and lighting matches behind my back. It started small. 3 days after the party, I got a text from Jacob. Just one line. "Hey man, sorry about Diane. She was just trying to be funny." No apology. No acknowledgement that maybe putting "better luck next time" on my name card was a little more than just a joke. No, Jacob wanted to smooth things over the way he always did. Casually, quickly, without actually dealing with anything. I didn't respond. I stared at the message for a long time, then shoved my phone in a drawer and went for a walk. I figured some distance would do me good. But distance doesn't mean much when they drag your name back into every conversation anyway. The first real crack came a week later when I got lunch with my dad. We hadn't seen each other in months, but he called out of the blue and said he wanted to catch up. He chose a place near his office, some upscale bistro that charged $17 for a sandwich. We made small talk at first. Work, the weather, the usual. And then he leaned back in his chair and looked at me with that tired, analytical expression I remembered from my teenage years. "I heard about what happened at the engagement party," he said. I raised an eyebrow. "Yeah." He sipped his iced tea. "I think you could have handled it better." I almost laughed. "I could have handled it better? You mean when Diane mocked my divorce in front of a room full of people?" "She didn't mean it like that," he said. "You've always been a little sensitive, Aaron. And dramatic." There it was. That word. Dramatic. The one they pulled out whenever I refused to roll over and take the disrespect quietly. I clenched my jaw and stared out the window, trying to keep my voice even. I left quietly. I didn't throw a fit. I didn't make a scene. I made a toast and walked out. Dad nodded slowly, like he was thinking it over. "Maybe so. But Jacob's upset. He thinks you embarrassed him." "Oh, I'm so sorry for ruining his curated Instagram moment." I snapped, louder than I meant to. A few people at nearby tables turned to look. My dad's face stiffened. "I'm just saying," he said, lowering his voice. "You might consider reaching out. Apologize." I stared at him, really looked at him, and I realized in that moment that I didn't recognize the man sitting across from me. Or maybe I never had. Maybe I'd always just tried to believe he was more than a shell of a father going through the motions. "I'm not apologizing," I said. "Not this time." He didn't push back. He just nodded again, as if I'd confirmed something for him. He paid the bill, shook my hand like we were coworkers, and left without a hug. That would have been enough, honestly. I was already drifting from the family, and after that, I figured the divide would grow quietly. Naturally, let things fade. But Diane had other plans. See, Diane wasn't the type to let a moment go. She didn't just want me out of the picture. She wanted control over how I was remembered. And like any good villain, she knew how to play the long game. It started with the Facebook post. Just a casual status update with a smiling photo of Jacob and Rachel holding hands. So proud of our sweet boy Jacob. He's come so far, even while carrying the weight of others' bitterness. Family isn't always easy, but the ones who stay are the ones who matter. I wasn't tagged. She didn't have to tag me. Everyone in our extended family knew exactly who she was talking about. My cousin Jenna texted me a screenshot with a "what" attached. I ignored it. Then came the whispers. At first from people I barely talked to, my aunt's husband's cousin, someone I met once at a reunion, but they spread fast. Comments about how I'd walked out for attention, how I couldn't handle seeing my brother happy. As if my personal pain was a vendetta. As if I was jealous. What stung most was that no one asked me why. They just assumed. And Jacob? He stayed silent. Which, in some ways, was worse than anything Diane could have posted. Silence from your own brother is loud in ways you can't explain. It tells people which side to pick. I let a month go by. I didn't reach out. I buried myself in work. Focused on rebuilding, on healing from the divorce, on learning who I was outside of everyone's expectations. It was slow, but it was something. I started therapy. I reconnected with a few old friends. And for a while, I felt okay. Then I got the wedding invitation. It was hand-delivered to my apartment by courier. No return address. Just a thick, white envelope with gold calligraphy that spelled out my name like I was a guest at some royal ball. Inside was the invitation. You are cordially invited to the wedding of Jacob Carter and Rachel Evans. It was extravagant, of course. The date was 3 months away. The venue a countryside vineyard that probably cost more than my annual salary. But what caught my eye wasn't the location or the RSVP card. It was the note tucked inside. Not from Jacob. From Diane. Dear Aaron, we would be delighted for you to attend, if you're ready to support your brother like a real man this time. No theatrics. No bitterness. Just family. Diane. I nearly tore it in half. But I didn't. I sat with it. Stared at it. Thought about every moment. Every sideways comment. Every passive-aggressive dig. Every time I'd bitten my tongue so hard, I tasted blood. And I realized something. They weren't just inviting me to the wedding. They were inviting me to fail again. To be the outsider. The afterthought. The +1 to my own humiliation. I didn't RSVP. I didn't say a word. I waited. And then the real betrayal came. About 6 weeks before the wedding, I got a call from my dad. Not a voice message, not a text. A full-on, old-fashioned phone call. Aaron, he said, his voice tight. I need to talk to you about something. I was already on edge. What is it? It's complicated. But Jacob and Rachel, well, they asked for a favor. Financially. I felt my stomach twist. From you. No. From you. I blinked. What? They're having some issues with the final venue payment, he said. Something with the caterers, I'm not sure. Jacob mentioned how well your company's been doing lately. And, well, they were hoping you might be willing to help out. As a gesture, I laughed. I actually laughed out loud. You're joking, I said. It's just a few $1,000s, he replied. They'll pay you back. Eventually. So let me get this straight, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. They publicly humiliate me. Trash my name behind my back. Send a wedding invite with a backhanded insult tucked inside. And now they want me to pay for it. Dad sighed. It's not about that. It's about family. No, I said. It's about control. And then came the part that burned. They already told the vendors you'd cover it, he said quietly. They assumed you'd say yes. I felt cold. Not angry. Not even shocked. Just cold. They what? I said. They looked, Diane said. Of course she did. I didn't let him finish. I hung up. For 2 full days, I didn't speak. Not to him. Not to Jacob. Not to anyone. I just sat with the weight of it all. The years of being overlooked. The years of being expected to absorb the blow, swallow the insult, smile through the pain. I kept hearing Diane's voice. You did get divorced, didn't you? And I thought, maybe it's time I started acting like someone who's got nothing left to lose. That was the breaking point. Not the name card. Not the Facebook post. Not the fake apology texts or the whispered rumors or even the absurd request for money. It was the assumption, the expectation that I'd play along, that I'd show up and smile and foot the bill for people who didn't respect me enough to say my name without mockery. They thought I'd stay quiet. But they forgot one thing. I've been quiet my whole life. And the thing about silence? When it breaks, it's loud. And I was about to make some noise. I didn't sleep much after that phone call. Not that night, or the night after. You'd think after all these years I'd be used to the emotional landmines my family liked to plant in every interaction. But this one hit different. Not because they asked for money, though that was galling, but because they assumed I'd say yes. Like I owed them. Like I was still the background character in their story, the responsible one they could rely on when things got messy. And that was the moment I realized something ugly. For most of my life, I had been that person. The fixer. The fallback. The dependable older brother who never made a scene, who always picked up the pieces, who didn't complain when his younger sibling got the spotlight while he cleaned up behind the curtain. Even when Diane entered our lives and started reshaping the narrative, even when Dad stopped seeing me as a son and started seeing me as a disappointment in waiting, I still played my part. I kept showing up. I kept trying. But trying had gotten me nothing. No respect. No understanding. Not even basic decency. So I unplugged for a while. I stopped checking my phone. Turned off notifications. Didn't answer the door when the mailman rang. I let the world go quiet, which, at first, felt like surrender. But after a few days, I realized it was something else. It was detox. From them. From the noise. From the years of feeling like I was on trial in my own family. I hit what I guess you could call an emotional rock bottom. You'd think a divorce would have been the lowest point, and for a while it was. But that was a different kind of pain. That was grief over something that had once worked. This was something else entirely. This was the realization that the people who were supposed to have my back never really had. I spent a few weeks in that fog. Woke up late. Barely ate. Let emails pile up. My therapist called it an emotional freeze. Said it was my body finally giving in to the exhaustion it had been carrying for years. I didn't argue. I just nodded, kept going to our sessions, and waited for the part where things stopped feeling so heavy. And eventually, they did. Not overnight. Not with some magical moment of clarity. But slowly, quietly. One morning, I woke up and didn't feel like I was drowning. So I showered. I made coffee. I opened my laptop and responded to a few client messages. Nothing major, just little things to get back in motion. Then I called a friend I hadn't spoken to since the divorce. His name was Mark, and we used to grab lunch once a week before everything fell apart. I expected him to be annoyed. He wasn't. He picked up on the second ring and said, "About time." That one call turned into lunch, which turned into a long talk, which turned into plans to collaborate on a freelance project. Mark was in digital marketing, and I worked in UX design. We'd always talked about starting something together, but never pulled the trigger. Now, with nothing tying me down and no family obligations weighing on me, it felt like the perfect time. We didn't jump into anything formal. Just started slow, one small client, then another. Word of mouth picked up. I rebuilt my portfolio. Got back into the rhythm of designing, creating, solving problems. And for the first time in a long time, I felt capable. Not just functional. Capable. There was something grounding about it. I wasn't rich. I wasn't some overnight success story. But I was building something of my own. Something I didn't have to explain or apologize for. Something that didn't need Diane's approval or Jacob's shadow to exist. My apartment, once cluttered and gray, started feeling like mine again. I hung a few prints I'd been meaning to frame. I bought new bedding. Rearranged the furniture. It was a small space, but it was mine. No judgment. No expectations. Just peace. And in the quiet, I started noticing things I'd never let myself feel before. Like how my default setting was guilt. How I'd spent years second-guessing myself because someone else decided I should be ashamed. How I measured my worth against Jacob's wins, even when they came from shortcuts and charm instead of hard work. How I'd let Diane convince me that quiet strength was weakness, that kindness meant passivity, that walking away from dysfunction was a moral failure. But I wasn't broken. I wasn't dramatic. I wasn't bitter. I was healing. One of the turning points came unexpectedly. I was scrolling through Instagram, not doom scrolling this time, just checking in, when I saw a post from Rachel, Jacob's fiancée. It was a photo of her and Jacob at a tasting event, smiling at the camera, holding wine glasses. The caption read, "Counting down the days, ring, can't wait to be Mrs. Carter. Grateful for real family who show up when it matters." That word again. Real. It stung more than I wanted it to. But instead of spiraling, I closed the app, took a breath, and then I did something I hadn't done in years. I started writing. Not an angry message. Not a rant. Just thoughts. For myself. A letter I never planned to send. It started like this. To the family who never really saw me. I forgive you for not knowing how much it hurt. I poured everything into it. The pain. The confusion. The longing. The realization that I'd been chasing approval from people who didn't even like me, let alone love me in the way I needed. It was ugly. It was honest. And by the end of it, I felt lighter. Like I'd finally put something down I'd been carrying since I was 15. I didn't send it. I didn't need to. Because it wasn't about them anymore. It was about me. About reclaiming the version of myself that existed before Diane's passive-aggressive remarks, before Dad's disappointment, before Jacob's effortless golden boy narrative swallowed me whole. Around that time, Mark and I landed our biggest client yet, an eco-startup looking for a full rebrand. It was the kind of project that required weeks of planning, wireframes, design systems, content strategy. It was a beast, and I crushed it, not just technically, but creatively. Strategically, our pitch blew the client away. We signed a 6-month retainer deal, and I officially became a 50% partner in our new agency. We named it Northbound, because no matter where you start, there's always a direction worth going. By now, the wedding was just a couple of weeks away. I still hadn't RSVP'd. I hadn't spoken to Jacob, or Diane, or Dad, but I was no longer stewing in silence. I was planning. Not revenge. Not exactly. But something better. Something measured. Thoughtful. Strategic. Because if they wanted to play games, I wasn't going to fight them on their turf. I was going to rewrite the rules. But that came later. For now, I focused on what mattered. Northbound was growing. I hired an intern, a quiet, thoughtful kid fresh out of design school who reminded me of myself a decade ago. I started mentoring him, helping him with client calls, giving feedback, teaching him how to stand up for his ideas without apologizing for them. One day, after a long meeting, he looked at me and said, "You're, really good at this." I didn't know how to respond. Not because I didn't believe it, but because it was the first time in years someone said it without an edge. Without a but, or a caveat, or an unspoken comparison to someone shinier. I nodded and said, "Thanks." And I meant it. The closer the wedding got, the quieter my phone became. I knew they were circling the drain, probably confused as to why I hadn't responded, why I wasn't groveling or lashing out. That was the thing about people like Diane. They needed control, but more than that, they needed reaction. When you take that away, they unravel. I got one more call from my dad the week of the wedding. I didn't answer. His voicemail was short, tired, something about regret and just showing face and for your brother's sake. I deleted it because I'd spent my whole life showing up for people who wouldn't return the favor. This time, they were going to see what it looked like when I showed up for myself. And not just quietly. No, they weren't just going to notice. They were going to feel it. It's strange, the way revenge stops looking like fire and starts feeling like clarity. When I was younger, I imagined vengeance as this cathartic explosion, yelling, burning bridges, flipping tables, slamming doors. But as I sat at my desk one quiet Tuesday evening, sipping black coffee and reviewing the latest brand assets for our client, I realized something. Real revenge isn't noise. It's precision. It's silence while they panic. Calm while they spiral. It's rising so far above their nonsense that when you finally do speak, the entire room goes quiet. That was the energy I carried into the final days before the wedding. Northbound was thriving. We'd just onboarded a new wellness client, and our agency's name had started floating around mid-sized circles. Mark was ecstatic. He wanted to expand. Talked about getting a physical office. Bringing on a PR rep. I was all for it. Not just because it meant success, but because it meant control. The kind of control Diane had never let me taste growing up. For the first time, I wasn't reacting to my family's chaos. I was building outside of it. And with every new project, every happy client, every invoice paid in full, I was reclaiming something they never expected me to find: identity. But the thing is, you can only ignore a fire behind you for so long. Jacob's wedding was now a week away. I still hadn't RSVP'd, and the silence was driving them nuts. I knew because my cousin Jenna texted me out of nowhere. "Jenna, hey, Diane asked me to reach out. She's worried about how things will look if you don't show." I laughed out loud. Not about family. Not about support. Optics. Diane was curating her perfect image. Golden sun, perfect new daughter-in-law, white vineyard wedding, and just enough tears to sell sincerity. What she couldn't afford was the black sheep, the older brother, now mysteriously absent, whose silence would make people whisper. It wasn't just about me not being there. It was about what people would assume. So I called Jenna. She was hesitant at first, clearly caught in the middle, but we'd always had a soft spot for each other. She was one of the few family members who saw through Diane early on. "You're not really going, are you?" she asked quietly. I didn't answer. Instead, I asked her to tell me everything she knew. About the wedding, the guests, the venue, the money. And when she started talking, I started seeing the cracks. See, here's what Diane never factored in. Jacob isn't as organized as he thinks he is. And Diane, for all her micromanaging, is still just one person. Between them, they had pulled off the image of a high-end event, but in reality, they were drowning in overcommit deposits, delayed vendor payments, and a maxed-out credit line under my father's name. They'd counted on family support to patch it all together. Specifically me. I was supposed to pay off the balance with one quiet bank transfer, but I didn't. So the balance was still hanging there, unpaid. And the caterer? They were threatening to cancel. Jenna even forwarded me a panicked email Diane sent to the wedding coordinator, full of vague promises and passive-aggressive flattery, the kind of thing people write when they've already missed the deadline but still expect exceptions. That's when I saw it, my opportunity, because they didn't just want me at this wedding anymore. They needed me. They needed me to show up, smile, and prove to everyone that the Carter family was whole and harmonious. And if I played this right, they were going to regret ever assuming I was weak. So I made a plan. The first step was subtle. I updated my Instagram. Just one photo, black and white. Me at a rooftop event with Mark, holding champagne, our client's logo in the background. Caption: Northbound launches our next chapter. Stay tuned. It was nothing flashy, just polished enough to look important. I knew Diane still followed me on her burner account. She'd once accidentally liked one of my posts at 2 a.m., then unliked it 3 minutes later. Classic. I posted the picture at noon on Thursday. At 12:07, I got a text from my dad. Saw your company is doing well. Proud of you. First time he'd said that in a decade. By 4 p.m., I got an email from Diane. It was dressed up as a formal RSVP reminder, but the message was clear. We've left your seat open in hopes you'll reconsider. Jacob would be so happy to see you, and I think everyone would benefit from a little peace. Let's be the bigger people. The bigger people. The irony was suffocating. But I didn't respond. Instead, I called Mark. Hey, I said. You know that pitch we're working on for Ecogen? Yeah, he said. The one you said we'd finish after the wedding week. We're finishing it before the wedding. He paused. You okay, man? I'm great, I said. I just need to clear my schedule that weekend. I've got something to take care of. The next few days were a blur of planning. I made calls, sent emails, pulled up every receipt, document, and message from my earlier interactions with Jacob and Diane. I compiled a folder, digital and physical, of everything they'd ever said or done that crossed the line. The name card, the bouquet, the voicemail from Dad asking for money, the text from Jenna confirming the unpaid vendors. Not to weaponize, not yet, but to prepare. Because if they were going to drag me back into their spotlight, I was going to control the script. And then, 3 days before the wedding, the final piece fell into place. Jenna called me again, whispering. I wasn't supposed to say anything, she said, but Diane's planning to do a family slideshow at the rehearsal dinner. Oh, I said, trying to keep my voice casual. She's cutting you out of it. I blinked. What? She said you won't be attending anyway, and she doesn't want to dampen the mood. It's basically Jacob's life story up to now. You're in one baby picture, and then you just disappear. I let that sink in. Erased. Not even subtle. I wasn't just the problem anymore. I was the inconvenient footnote they'd rather people forgot. And suddenly, I knew exactly how I was going to play this. No shouting. No drama. No confrontation in the middle of the vows. Just a quiet, public reminder. I'm not someone you erase. The night before the wedding, I sent a single message. To Jacob. Not long. Not emotional. Just, hey, I've decided to attend. Let me know if there's anything you need me to bring. He responded in under a minute. Really? That's awesome, man. Means a lot. Let me check with Diane Ree. Seating, but I think there's still space. Of course there's space. They never stopped counting on me. That night, I didn't sleep much. But not because I was anxious. Because I was ready. I ironed my best suit. The dark navy one I wore when Northbound got our first retainer client. I printed something and folded it neatly into an envelope. Then another. Then 3 more. Each with a name. Then I packed them in a slim black folder. And just before I zipped it up, I added one last thing. A copy of that letter I wrote months ago, the one I never sent. To the family who never really saw me. Because I wanted to remember who I was before this. Before the show. Before the silence. Before the toast that would change everything. Because what they didn't know, what they'd never seen coming, was that I wasn't just attending their perfect wedding. I was rewriting my role in their story. One truth at a time. The vineyard was perfect. Golden sunlight, white linen tents, flowers draped in cascading archways. The whole place looked like it had been airlifted from a wedding magazine. Guests mingled, laughed, posed for photos in front of curated backdrops that spelled out #Jacob and Rachel 2023 in gold script. I arrived 5 minutes before the ceremony. Sharp navy suit, polished shoes, calm expression. I didn't wear a tie. I didn't need to. People noticed. I caught the double takes, the stiff nods, the fake smiles. A few guests, cousins, old family friends, gave me hesitant greetings, unsure which version of me they were supposed to acknowledge. The bitter older brother Diane had been whispering about, or the quiet, successful man who'd just walked in like he owned the place. I nodded back, said little. Let the silence do the work. Diane spotted me first. She froze mid-conversation, glass of wine in one hand, perfectly manicured smile cracking just slightly. She walked over like a politician at a fundraiser, warm, wide-eyed, pretending we hadn't been locked in a Cold War for months. "Aaron," she said, tone sugary and brittle. "You came. We weren't sure. You invited me." I replied flatly. "I accepted." She laughed. Too loud. "Of course. Well, it means so much to Jacob. We're just thrilled you could be here." I stared at her for a beat, then smiled politely. "Wouldn't miss it." She looked relieved. Mistook my calm for surrender. That was her mistake. Because my calm wasn't submission. It was strategy. The ceremony itself was uneventful. Beautiful, sure. Vineyard weddings always are, but nothing out of the ordinary. Rachel walked down the aisle in a lace-trimmed gown, tears in her eyes. Jacob beamed. The officiant talked about love, family, growth. No one mentioned the missing caterer. Because that had been handled the night before, by me. See, Diane had finally scraped together the funds to cover the overdue balance, but I'd already gotten to the caterer first. I didn't cancel anything. I didn't even mention the drama. I simply offered to take care of the invoice as a gift, then politely declined to follow through after hearing Diane had opted to handle it instead. I made sure they were aware of the prior drama, the assumptions, the missed deadlines. So they came, but they came late. The food arrived 30 minutes behind schedule. And cold. That's not enough to ruin a wedding. But it's enough to shake a control freak like Diane. I watched her smile twitch every time a guest quietly asked if there were appetizers. I watched Rachel's father glance at his watch during the champagne delay. I hadn't torched the event. I just let reality catch up to their lies. But the real moment? The real moment came at the reception. Dinner was winding down. The MC, some over-enthusiastic friend of Jacob's from college, tapped the mic and asked everyone to gather near the stage for the slideshow. Diane's masterpiece. It started predictably. Baby pictures of Jacob, soft piano music, captions like "a boy full of dreams" and "always smiling." There were family beach trips, Christmas mornings, graduation shots. And as expected, I vanished somewhere around slide 8. From that point on, it was just Jacob and Diane, and occasionally Rachel. You'd never know he had a brother. Never know his real mother passed away. Never know there was once another branch to this family tree. The slideshow ended with a quote. "The best families are made, not born." I stood in the back, arms crossed, watching the faces in the room. Some looked confused. Others exchanged glances. A few avoided looking at me at all. Perfect. The MC cleared his throat. "And now, before we get to the toasts, we have a very special message from the groom's brother. Aaron, are you here?" All heads turned. Jacob looked up from his seat, caught off guard but grinning. Clearly thought I was about to make amends. Offer a sentimental olive branch. Diane froze. I walked slowly to the mic. No rush. No dramatic music. Just silence and tension and my polished shoes against polished wood. I took the mic, looked out at a sea of polite anticipation. Then I smiled. "Good evening, everyone. I'm Aaron, Jacob's older brother, the one who apparently died in 2002, judging by that slideshow." A few nervous laughs. Some startled. Others dead silent. But don't worry. I'm alive. And I'm grateful to be here today. Truly. I reached into my jacket, pulled out a stack of envelopes, held them up. See, I wasn't planning to speak. But since I've been asked, and since Diane worked so hard to curate the perfect image of this family, I thought it might be helpful to share a few alternate perspectives. I handed the first envelope to the MC. Inside are 5 letters. Short, honest. One each for my father, my brother, Diane, Rachel, and the slideshow itself. Yes, the slideshow gets its own. A few people chuckled. Most were holding their breath. These letters don't contain rage, or bitterness, or drama, just truth. The kind that gets lost when people are more concerned with appearances than accountability. I let that hang in the air. Then I leaned in. And if you'd prefer not to read them, that's fine. But I'll tell you what they say in one sentence. You can't erase someone and expect them to stay silent. I handed the mic back. No grand exit. Just calm steps off the stage, folder tucked under my arm. The room erupted. Not in applause. In conversation. Whispers. Shuffling chairs. Guests turning to each other, asking what just happened. I walked past Diane on the way to the exit. Her face pale, hands shaking slightly as she reached for her wine. My dad stood frozen, reading the letter I'd just handed him. Jacob looked stunned. Rachel? She looked conflicted, like maybe she'd finally realized the truth. This picture-perfect family came at a cost. And I was the receipt. The aftermath came quickly. The next day, Jenna called me. Diane's furious, she said, unable to hide the amusement in her voice. She tried to do damage control, but people noticed. Half the guests are texting each other. Rachel's uncle posted a quote from your toast on Facebook. That made me smile. A few days later, I got an email from Rachel. Just one line. Thank you for telling the truth. Nothing more. Nothing less. And Jacob? Silence. Of course. He was never built for confrontation. Only for charm and comfort. But the biggest surprise came from my dad. He called. His voice, when I picked up, was raw. Not angry. Not accusatory. Just quiet. I read your letter, he said. Twice. I said nothing. I should have stood up for you, he added after a beat. Back then. And now. More silence. Then. I don't expect forgiveness. But I'd like to start seeing things clearly, if you'll let me. I didn't answer right away. I just breathed. Then I said, we'll see. And that was enough. For now. Life moved on. Northbound expanded. We got that PR rep, moved into a co-working space downtown, hired our first full-time employee. I kept building, not in spite of what my family did, but because I'd finally stopped letting them define me. I was no longer the forgotten brother. No longer the fallback. No longer the ghost in their slideshow. And every time someone new asked me about my family, I didn't hesitate. I told the truth. Calmly. Clearly. Without shame. Because the greatest revenge isn't just showing them who you are. It's becoming someone they can't ignore. Even when they try. Even when they need to. Even when it burns. And the final letter I wrote? The one I never delivered? It ends like this. You built a world where I didn't belong. So I built one where I didn't need you. And in that world, I thrived. That's the world I live in now. And for the first time in my life, it's mine.